He could almost feel the spear points again, pricking if he so much as twitched a finger. Bane, laughing all the while, had told him she had never heard of a man actually asking to play Maiden's Kiss. Carloman stroked his beard and spoke into Matt's hesitation. "You cannot stop there. Go on." When was this?" 2 nights ago, I'll wager. When you didn't come for the game and no one knew where you were." "I was playing stones with Tom Merrilin that night," Matt said quickly. This was days ago. He was glad he could lie with a straight face. They each took a kiss. That's all. That's all. If she thought it was a good kiss, they eased up with the spears. If not, they pushed a little harder, to encourage, you might say. That was all. I'll tell you this, I got nicked less than I do shaving. He stuck his pipe back between his teeth. If they wanted to know more, they could go ask to play the game themselves. He almost hoped some of them were fool enough. Bloody aiel women and their bloody spears. He had not made it to his own bed until daybreak. "It will be more than enough for me," Carloman said dryly. "The light burn my soul if it would not." He tossed a silver crown into the center of the table and dealt himself another card. Maiden's Kiss. He shook with mirth, and another ripple of laughter ran around the table. Baron bought his 5th card, and Estian fumbled a coin from the heap scattered in front of him, peering at it to see what it was. They would not stop now. "Savages," Baran muttered around his pipe. "Ignorant savages. That is all they are. Burn my soul. Live in caves, out in the waste. In caves. No one but a savage could live in the waste." Raymond nodded. "At least they serve the Lord Dragon. I would take 100 defenders and clean them out of the stone, if not for that." Baran and Carloman growled fierce agreement. It was no effort for Matt to keep his face straight. He had heard much the same before. Boasting was easy when no one expected you to carry through. 100 defenders. Even if Rand stood aside for some reason, the few hundred aiel holding the stone could probably keep it against any army Tyr could raise. Not that they seemed to want the stone, really. Matt suspected they were only there because Rand was. He did not think any of these lordlings had figured that out. They tried to ignore the aiel as much as possible, but he doubted it would make them feel any better. Matt. Estienne fanned his cards out in one hand, rearranging them as if he could not decide what order they were meant to go in. "Matt, you will speak to the Lord Dragon, won't you?" "About what?" Matt asked cautiously. Too many of these Tyrens knew he and Rand had grown up together to suit him, and they seemed to think he was arm in arm with Rand whenever he was out of their sight. None of them would have gone near his own brother if he could channel. He did not know why they thought him a bigger fool. "Didn't I say?" The plain-faced man squinted at his cards and scratched his head, then brightened. Oh yes, his proclamation, Matt, the Lord Dragons. His last one, where he said commoners had the right to call lords before a magistrate. Whoever heard of a lord being summoned to a magistrate? And for peasants. Matt's hand tightened on his purse until the coins inside grated together. "It would be a shame," he said quietly, "if you were tried and judged just for having your way with a fisherman's daughter, whatever she wanted, or for having some farmer beaten for splashing mud on your cloak." The others shifted uneasily, catching his mood, but Estelle nodded, head bobbing, so it seemed about to fall off. Exactly. They wouldn't come to that, of course. A lord being tried before a magistrate? Of course not. Not really. He laughed drunkenly at his cards. No fisherman's daughters. Smell of fish, you see, however you have them washed. A plump farm girl is best. Matt told himself he was there to gamble. He told himself to ignore the fool's blather, reminded himself of how much gold he could take out of Estienne's purse. His tongue did not listen, though. Who knows what it might come to? Hangings, maybe. Dorian gave him a sidelong look, guarded and uneasy. "Do we have to talk about, about commoners, Estan? What about old Asteriel's daughters? Have you decided which you'll marry yet?" "What?" "Whore." "Oh, I'll flip a coin, I suppose." Estan frowned at his cards, shifted one, and frowned again. "Medor has 2 or 3 pretty maids. Perhaps Medor." Matt took a long drink from his silver wine cup to keep from hitting the man in his farmer's face. He was still on his first cup. The 2 servants had given up trying to add more. If he hit Estienne, none of them would lift a hand to stop him. Not even Estienne. because he was the Lord Dragon's friend. He wished he was in a tavern somewhere out in the city, where some dockman might question his luck, and only a quick tongue or quick feet or quick hands would see him leave with a whole skin. Now that was a fool thought. Eodorian glanced at Matt again, measuring his mood. "I heard a rumor today. I hear the Lord Dragon is taking us to war with Ilion." Matt gagged on his wine. "War?" he spluttered. "War," Raymond agreed happily around his pipe stem. "Are you certain?" Carloman said, and Baron added, "I've heard no rumors. I heard it just today from 3 or 4 tongues." Eodorian seemed to be absorbed in his cards. "Who can say how true it is? It must be true," Raymond said. "With the Lord Dragon to lead us, holding Kalandor, we'll not even have to fight. He will scatter their armies, and we will march straight into Ilion. Too bad, in a way. Burn my soul if it isn't. I would like a chance to match swords with the Ilioners." "You'll get no chance with the Lord Dragon leading," Baran said. "They will fall on their knees as soon as they see the dragon banner." "And if they do not," Carloman added with a laugh, "the Lord Dragon will blast them with lightning where they stand." "Ilion first," Ryman said. And then we'll conquer the world for the Lord Dragon." "You tell him I said so, Matt." "The whole world." Matt shook his head. A month gone, they would have been horrified by even the idea of a man who could channel, a man doomed to go mad and die horribly. Now they were ready to follow Rand into battle and trust his power to win for them. Trust the power, though it was not likely they would put it that way. Yet he supposed they had to find something to hang on to. The invincible stone was in the hands of the aiel. The dragon reborn was in his chambers 100 feet above their heads, and Kalandor was with him. 3,000 years of Tyrene belief and history lay in ruins, and the world had been turned on its head. He wondered whether he had handled it any better. His own world had gone all askew in little more than a year. He rolled a gold Tyrene crown across the backs of his fingers. However well he had done, he would not go back. "When will we march, Matt?" Baran asked. "I don't know," he said slowly. "I don't think Ram would start a war, unless he has gone mad already." That hardly bore thinking about. The others looked as if he had assured them the sun would not come up tomorrow. "We are all loyal to the Lord Dragon, of course." Eodorian frowned at his cards. "Out in the countryside, though. I hear that some of the High Lords, a few, have been trying to raise an army to take back the stone." Suddenly no one was looking at Matt, though Estienne still seemed to be trying to make out his cards. "When the Lord Dragon takes us to war, of course, it will all melt away. In any case, we are loyal, here in the stone. The High Lords too, I am certain. It is only the few, out in the countryside. Their loyalty would not outlast their fear of the Dragon reborn." For a moment, Matt felt as though he were planning to abandon Rand in a pit of vipers. Then he remembered what Rand was. It was more like abandoning a weasel in a henyard. Rand had been a friend. The Dragon reborn, though. Who could be a friend to the Dragon reborn? "I'm not abandoning anybody." He could probably pull the stone down on their heads if he wanted to. On my head, too. He told himself again that it was time to be gone. "No fisherman's daughters," Estienne mumbled. "You will speak to the Lord Dragon." "It is your turn, Matt," Carloman said anxiously. He looked half afraid, though what he feared, that Estienne would anger Matt again, or that the talk might go back to loyalty, was impossible to say. "Will you buy the 5th card or stack?" Matt realized he had not been paying attention. Everyone but himself and Carloman had 5 cards, though Raymond had neatly stacked his face down beside the pot to show that he was out. Matt hesitated, pretending to think, then sighed and tossed another coin toward the pile. As the silver crown bounced end over end, he suddenly felt luck grow from trickles to a flood. Every ping of silver against wooden tabletop rang clear in his head. He could have called face or sigil and known how the coin would land on any bounce, just as he knew what his next card would be before Carloman laid it in front of him. Sliding his cards together on the table, he fanned them in one hand. The ruler of flame stared at him alongside the other 4, the amyrlin seat balancing a flame on her palm, though she looked nothing like Shuan Sanch. However the Tyrens felt about Aes Sedai, they acknowledged the power of Tar Valon, even if flames was the lowest suit. What were the odds of being dealt all 5? His luck was best with random things like dice, but perhaps a little more was beginning to rub off on cards. "The light burn my bones to ash if it is not so," he muttered. Or that was what he meant to say. "There," Eston all but shouted. "You cannot deny it this time." That was the old tongue. Something about burning and bones. He grinned around the table. "My tutor would be proud. I ought to send him a gift. If I can find out where he went." Nobles were supposed to be able to speak the old tongue, though in reality few knew more than Estienne seemed to. The young lord set to arguing over exactly what Matt had said. They seemed to think it had been a comment on the heat. Goosebumps pebbled Matt's skin as he tried to recall the words that had just come out of his mouth. A string of gibberish, yet it almost seemed he should understand. "Burn, moiraine. If she'd left me alone, I wouldn't have holes in my memory big enough for a wagon and team, and I wouldn't be spouting whatever it bloody is." He would also be milking his father's cows instead of walking the world with a pocketful of gold, but he managed to ignore that part of it. "Are you here to gamble?" he said harshly, "or babble like old women over their knitting?" "To gamble," Baran said curtly. 3 crowns, gold." He tossed the coins onto the pot. "And 3 more besides." Estain hiccuped and added 6 golden crowns to the pile. Suppressing a grin, Matt forgot about the old tongue. It was easy enough, he did not want to think about it. Besides, if they were starting this strongly, he might win enough on this hand to leave in the morning. And if he's crazy enough to start a war, I'll leave if I have to walk. Outside in the darkness, a cock crowed. Matt shifted uneasily and told himself not to be foolish. No one was going to die. His eyes dropped to his cards and blinked. The amyrlin's flame had been replaced by a knife. While he was telling himself he was tired and seeing things, she plunged the tiny blade into the back of his hand. With a hoarse yell, he flung the cards away and hurled himself backward, overturning his chair, kicking the table with both feet as he fell. The air seemed to thicken like honey. Everything moved as if time had slowed, but at the same time, everything seemed to happen at once. Other cries echoed his, hollow shouts reverberating inside a cavern. He and the chair drifted back and down. The table floated upward. The ruler of flames hung in the air, growing larger, staring at him with a cruel smile. Now close to life-size, she started to step out of the card. She was still a painted shape, with no depth, but she reached for him with her blade, red with his blood, as if it had already been driven into his heart. Beside her, the ruler of cups began to grow, the Tyran High Lord drawing his sword. Matt floated, yet somehow he managed to reach the dagger in his left sleeve and hurl it in the same motion, straight for the amyrlin's heart. If this thing had a heart. The second knife came into his left hand smoothly, and left more smoothly. The 2 blades drifted through the air like thistledown. He wanted to scream, but that first yellow shock and outrage still filled his mouth. The ruler of rods was expanding beside the first 2 cards. The Queen of Andor gripping the rod like a bludgeon, her red-gold hair framing a madwoman's snarl. He was still falling, still yelling that drawn-out yell. The amyrlin was free of her card, the High Lord striding out with his sword. The flat shapes moved almost as slowly as he. Almost. He had proof the steel in their hands could cut, and no doubt the rod could crack a skull. His skull. His thrown daggers moved as if sinking in jelly. He was sure the cock had crowed for him. Whatever his father said, the omen had been real. But he would not give up and die. Somehow he had 2 more daggers out from under his coat, one in either hand. Struggling to twist in mid-air, to get his feet under him, he threw one knife at the golden-haired figure with the bludgeon. The other he held on to as he tried to turn himself, to land ready to face. Ch. The world lurched back into normal motion, and he landed awkwardly on his side, hard enough to drive the wind out of him. Desperately he struggled to his feet, drawing another knife from under his coat. You could not carry too many, Tom claimed. Neither was needed. For a moment he thought cards and figures had vanished. Or maybe he had imagined it all. Maybe he was the one going mad. Then he saw the cards, back to ordinary size, pinned to one of the dark wood panels by his still quivering knives. He took a deep, ragged breath. The table lay on its side, coins still spinning across the floor, where lordlings and servants crouched among scattered cards. They gaped at Matt and his knives, those in his hands and those in the wall, with equally wide eyes. Estienne snatched a silver pitcher that had somehow escaped being overturned and began pouring wine down his throat, the excess spilling over his chin and down his chest. "Just because you do not have the cards to win," Edorian said hoarsely, "there is no need to." He cut off with a shudder. "You saw it too." Matt slipped the knives back into their sheaths. A thin trickle of blood ran down the back of his hand from the tiny wound. "Don't pretend you went blind." "I saw nothing," Riemon said woodenly. "Nothing." He began crawling across the floor, gathering up gold and silver, concentrating on the coins as if they were the most important thing in the world. The others were doing the same, except Estan, who scrambled about checking the fallen pitchers for any that still held wine. One of the servants had his face hidden in his hands. The other, eyes closed, was apparently praying in a low, breathless whine. With a muttered oath, Matt strode to where his knives pinned the 3 cards to the panel. They were only playing cards again, just stiff paper with the clear lacquer cracked. But the figure of the amyrlin still held a dagger instead of a flame. He tasted blood and realized he was sucking the cut in the back of his hand. Hastily he wrenched his knives free, tearing each card in half before tucking the blade away. After a moment he hunted through the cards littering the floor until he found the rulers of coins and wins, and tore them across too. He felt a little foolish. It was over and done with. The cards were just cards again, but he could not help it. None of the young lords crawling about on hands and knees tried to stop him. They scrambled out of his way, not even glancing at him. There would be no more gambling tonight, and maybe not for some nights to come. At least not with him. Whatever had happened, it had been aimed at him, clearly. Even more clearly, it had to have been done with the one power. They wanted no part of that. "Burn you, Rand," he muttered under his breath. "If you have to go mad, leave me out of it." His pipe lay in 2 pieces, the stem bitten through cleanly. Angrily, he grabbed his purse from the floor and stalked out of the room. In his darkened bedchamber, Rand tossed uneasily on a bed wide enough for 5 people. He was dreaming. Through a shadowy forest, Moiraine was prodding him with a sharp stick toward where the amyrlin seat waited, sitting on a stump with a rope halter for his neck in her hands. Dim shapes moved half-seen through the trees, stalking, hunting him. Here a dagger blade flashed in the failing light. Over there he caught a glimpse of ropes, ready for binding. Slender, and not as tall as his shoulder, Moiraine wore an expression he had never seen on her face. Here, sweating, she prodded harder, trying to hurry him to the amyrlin's halter. Dark friends, and the Forsaken in the shadows, the White Towers leash ahead, and Moiraine behind. Dodging Moiraine's stick, he fled. "It is too late for that," she called after him, but he had to get back. Muttering, he thrashed on the bed, then was still, breathing more easily for a moment. He was in the waterwood back home, sunlight slanting through the trees to sparkle on the pond in front of him. There was green moss on the rocks at this end of the pond, and 30 paces away at the other end, a small arc of wildflowers. This was where, as a child, he had learned to swim. You should have a swim now. He spun around with a start. Min stood there, grinning at him in her boy's coat and breeches, and next to her Elaine, with her red golden curls, in a green silk gown fit for her mother's palace. It was Min who had spoken, but Elaine added, "The water looks inviting, Rand. No one will bother us here." "I don't know," he began slowly. Min cut him off by twining her fingers behind his neck and pulling herself up on tiptoe to kiss him. She repeated Elaine's words in a soft murmur. "No one will bother us here." She stepped back and doffed her coat, then attacked the laces of her shirt. Rand stared, the more so when he realized Elaine's gown was lying on the mossy ground. The daughter heir was bending, arms crossed, gathering up the hem of her shift. "What are you doing?" he demanded in a strangled voice. "Getting ready to go swimming with you," Min replied. Elaine flashed him a smile and hoisted the shift over her head. He turned his back hastily, though half wanting not to, and found himself staring at Egwene, her big, dark eyes looking back at him sadly. Without a word she turned and vanished into the trees. "Wait!" he shouted after her. "I can explain." He began to run. He had to find her. But as he reached the edge of trees, Min's voice stopped him. "Don't go, Rand." She and Elaine were in the water already, only their heads showing as they swam lazily in the middle of the pond. "Come back," Elaine called, lifting a slim arm to beckon. Do you not deserve what you want for a change? He shifted his feet, wanting to move but unable to decide which way. What he wanted? The words sounded strange. What did he want? He raised a hand to his face, to wipe away what felt like sweat. Festering flesh almost obliterated the heron branded on his palm. White bone showed through red-edged gaps. With a jerk, he came awake, lying there shivering in the dark heat. Sweat soaked his small clothes and the linen sheets beneath his back. His side burned where an old wound had never healed properly. He traced the rough scar, a circle nearly an inch across, still tender after all this time. Even Moiraine's Aes Sedai healing could not mend it completely. But I'm not rotting yet. And I'm not mad either. Not yet. Not yet. That said it all. He wanted to laugh, and wondered if that meant he was a little mad already, dreaming about Min and Elaine, dreaming of them like that. Well, it was not madness, but it was surely foolishness. Neither one of them had ever looked at him in that way when he was awake. Egwene, he had been all but promised to since they were both children. The betrothal words had never been spoken in front of the women's circle, but everyone in and around Emond's Field knew they would marry one day. That one day would never come, of course, not now, not with the fate that lay ahead of a man who channeled. Egwene must have realized that, too. She must have. She was all wrapped up in becoming Aes Sedai. Still, women were odd. She might think she could be an Aes Sedai and marry him anyway, channeling or no channeling. How could he tell her that he did not want to marry her anymore, that he loved her like a sister? But there would not be any need to tell her, he was sure. He could hide behind what he was. She had to understand that. What man could ask a woman to marry him when he knew he had only a few years, if he was lucky, before he went insane, before he began to rot alive? He shivered despite the heat. I need sleep. The High Lords would be back in the morning, maneuvering for his favor, for the Dragon Reborn's favor. Maybe I won't dream this time. He started to roll over, searching for a dry place on the sheets, and froze, listening to small rustlings in the darkness. He was not alone. The sword that is not a sword lay across the room beyond his reach on a throne-like stand the High Lords had given him, no doubt in the hopes he would keep Callandor out of their sight. Someone wanting to steal Callandor. A second thought came. Or to kill the Dragon Reborn. He did not need Tom's whispered warnings to know that the High Lord's professions of undying loyalty were only words of necessity. He emptied himself of thought and emotions, assuming the void. That much came without effort. Floating in the cold emptiness within himself, thought and emotion outside, he reached for the true source. This time he touched it easily, which was not always the case. Saidin filled him like a torrent of white heat and light, exalting him with life, sickening him with the foulness of the Dark One's taint, like a skim of sewage floating on pure, sweet water. The torrent threatened to wash him away, burn him up, engulf him. Fighting the flood, he mastered it by bare effort of will, and rolled from the bed, channeling the power as he landed on his feet in the stance to begin the sword form called apple blossoms in the wind. His enemies could not be many, or they would have made more noise. The gentiname form was meant for use against more than one opponent. As his feet hit the carpet, a sword was in his hands, with a long hilt and a slightly curved blade, sharp on only one edge. It looked to have been wrought from flame, yet it did not feel even warm. The figure of a heron stood black against the yellow-red of the blade. In the same instant, every candle and gilded lamp burst alight, small mirrors behind them swelling the illumination. Larger mirrors on the walls, and 2 stand mirrors reflected it further, until he could have read comfortably anywhere in the large room. Callandor sat undisturbed, a sword seemingly of glass, hilt and blade, on a stand as tall as a man and just as wide, the wood ornately carved and gilded and set with precious stones. The furnishings, too, were all gilded and begemmed, bed and chairs and benches, wardrobes and chests and washstand. The pitcher and bowl were golden sea-folk porcelain, as thin as leaves. The broad tarabon carpet, in scrolls of scarlet and gold and blue, could have fed an entire village for months. Almost every flat surface held more delicate sea-folk porcelain, or else goblets and bowls and ornaments of gold worked with silver, and silver chased with gold. On the broad marble mantel over the fireplace, 2 silver wolves with ruby eyes, tried to pull down a golden stag, a good 3 feet tall. Draperies of scarlet silk, embroidered with eagles in thread of gold, hung at the narrow windows, stirring slightly in a failing wind. Books lay wherever there was room, leather-bound, wood-bound, some tattered and still dusty from the deepest shelves of the stone's library. Now, where he had thought to see assassins or thieves, one beautiful young woman stood hesitant and surprised in the middle of the carpet, black hair falling in shining waves to her shoulders. Her thin white silk robe emphasized more than it hid. Berelain, ruler of the city-state of Moiraine, was the last person he had expected. After one wide-eyed start, she made a deep, graceful curtsy that drew her garments tight. "I am unarmed, my Lord Dragon. I submit myself to your search, if you doubt me." Her smile suddenly made him uncomfortably aware that he wore nothing but his small clothes. "I'll be burned if she makes me scramble around trying to cover myself." The thought floated beyond the void. I didn't ask her to walk in on me, to sneak in. Anger and embarrassment drifted along the borders of emptiness too, but his face reddened all the same. Dimly he was aware of it, aware of the knowledge deepening the flush in his cheeks. So coldly calm within the void, outside, ch-ch-ch. He could feel each individual droplet of sweat sliding down his chest and back. It took a real effort of stubborn will to stand there under her eyes. Search her? The light helped me. Relaxing his stance, he let the sword vanish, but held the narrow flow, connecting him to Sedin. It was like drinking from a hole in a dike, when the whole long mound of earth wanted to give way, the water sweet as on-eyed wine and sickening as a rivulet through a midden. He did not know much of this woman, except that she walked through the stone as if it were her palace in Myene. Tom said the first of Myene asked questions constantly, of everyone. Questions about Rand, which might have been natural, given what he was, but they made him no easier in his mind. And she had not returned to Myene. That was not natural. She had been held captive in all but name for months, until his arrival, cut off from her throne and the ruling of her small nation. Most people would have taken the first opportunity to get away from a man who could channel. "What are you doing here?" He knew he sounded harsh and did not care. "There were aiel guarding that door when I went to sleep. How did you come past them?" Berelain's lips curved up a trifle more. To Rand it seemed the room had gotten suddenly even hotter. "They passed me through immediately when I said I'd been summoned by the Lord Dragon." "Summoned?" "I didn't summon anybody. Stop this," he told himself. "She's a queen, or the next thing to it. You know as much about the ways of queens as you do about flying." He tried to make himself be civil, only he did not know what to call the first of Moiraine. "My lady, be my lady." That would have to do. That would have to do. "I am. Why would I summon you at this time of night?" She gave a low, rich laugh deep in her throat, even wrapped in emotionless emptiness. It seemed to tickle his skin, make the hairs stir on his arms and legs. Suddenly he took in her clinging garb as if for the first time, and felt himself go red all over again. She can't mean. Can she? Light. I've never said 2 words to her before. "Perhaps I wish to talk, my Lord Dragon." She let the pale robe fall to the floor, revealing an even thinner white silk garment he could only call a nightgown. It left her smooth shoulders completely bare, and exposed a considerable expanse of pale bosom. He found himself wondering distantly what held it up. It was difficult not to stare. "You are a long way from your home, like me. The nights especially seem lonely. Tomorrow I will be happy to talk with you. But during the day people surround you, petitioners, high lords." "High lords?" "Aiel." She gave a shiver. He told himself he really ought to look away, but he could as easily have stopped breathing. He had never before been so aware of his own reactions when wrapped in the void. "The aiel frighten me, and I do not like Tyren lords of any sort." About the Tyrens he could believe her, but he did not think anything frightened this woman. "Burn me, she's in a strange man's bedchamber in the middle of the night, only half-dressed, and I'm the one who's jumpy as a cat in a dog run, void or no." It was time to put an end to things before they went too far. "It would be better if you returned to your own bedchamber, my lady." Part of him wanted to tell her to put on a cloak, too, a thick cloak. Part of him did. It is really too late for talking. Tomorrow, in daylight. She gave him a slanted, quizzical look. Have you absorbed stuffy Tyren ways already, my lord dragon? Or is this reticence something from your 2 rivers? We are not so. 2 to graze where? Formal. In Myine, my lady. He tried to sound formal. If she did not like formality, that was what he wanted. I am promised to egwene Olvir, my lady. You mean the Aes Sedai, my lord dragon? If she really is Aes Sedai, she is quite young, perhaps too young, to wear the ring and the shawl. Berelain spoke as if Egwene were a child, though she herself could not be more than a year older than Rand, if that, and he had only a little over 2 years on Egwene. My lord dragon, I do not mean to come between you. Marry her if she is Green Ajah. I would never aspire to wed the dragon reborn himself. Forgive me if I overstep myself, but I told you we are not so formal in Myine. May I call you Rand? Rand surprised himself by sighing regretfully. There had been a glint in her eye, a slight shift of expression, gone quickly when she mentioned marrying the dragon reborn. If she had not considered it before, she had now. The dragon reborn, not Rand al'Thor, the man of prophecy, not the shepherd from the 2 rivers. He was not shocked exactly. Some girls back home mooned over whoever proved himself fastest or strongest in the games at Beltane and Sunday, and now and again a woman set her eyes on the man with the richest fields or the largest flocks. It would have been good to think she wanted Rand al'Thor. It is time for you to go, my lady, he said quietly. She stepped closer. I can feel your eyes on me, Rand. Her voice was smoky heat. I am no village girl tied to her mother's apron, and I know you want. Do you think I'm made of stone, woman? She jumped at his roar, but the next instant she was crossing the carpet, reaching for him, her eyes dark pools that could pull a man into their depths. Your arms look as strong as stone. If you think you must be harsh with me, then be harsh, so long as you hold me. Her hands touched his face. Sparks seemed to leap from her fingers. Without thinking, he channeled the flow still linked to him, and suddenly she was staggering back, eyes wide with startlement, as if a wall of air pushed her. It was air, he realized. He did things without knowing what he was doing, more often than he did know. At least once done, he could usually remember how to do them again. The unseen, moving wall scraped ripples along the carpet, sweeping along Berelain's discarded robe, a boot he had tossed aside undressing, and a red leather footstool supporting an open volume of Eben Vandis's The History of the Stone of Tyr, pushing them along as it forced her almost to the wall, fenced her in. Safely away from him. In. He tied off the flow. That was all he could think to call what he did, and no longer needed to maintain the shield himself. For a moment he studied what he had done, until he was sure he could repeat it. It looked useful, especially the tying off. Dark eyes, still wide, Berelain felt along the confines of her invisible prison with trembling hands. Her face was almost as white as her skimpy silk shift. Footstool, boot and book lay at her feet, jumbled with the robe. Much as I regret it, he told her, we will not speak again, except in public, my lady. He really did regret it. Whatever her motives, she was beautiful. Burn me, I'm a fool. He was not sure how he meant that, for thinking of her beauty, or for sending her away. In fact, it is best you arrange your journey back to Myine as soon as possible. I promise you that Tyr will not trouble Myine again. You have my word. It was a promise good only for his lifetime, perhaps only as long as he stood in the stone, but he had to offer her something. A bandage for wounded pride, a gift to take her mind off being afraid. But her fear was already under control, on the outside at least. Honesty and openness filled her face, all efforts at allure gone. Forgive me, I've handled this badly. I did not mean to offend. In my country, a woman may speak her mind to a man freely, or he to her. Rand, you must know that you are a handsome man, tall and strong. I would be the one made of stone, if I did not see it, and admire. Please do not send me away from you. I will beg it, if you wish. She knelt smoothly, like a dance. Her expression still said she was being open, confessing everything. But on the other hand, in kneeling, she had managed to tug her already precarious gown down until it looked in real danger of falling off. Please, Rand. Even sheltered in emptiness as he was, he gaped at her, and it had nothing to do with her beauty or her near undress. Well, only partly. If the defenders of the stone had been half as determined as this woman, half as steadfast in purpose, 10,000 aiel could never have taken the stone. "I am flattered, my lady," he said diplomatically. "Believe me, I am. But it would not be fair to you. I cannot give you what you deserve, and let her make of that what she will." Outside in the darkness, a cock crowed. To Rand's surprise, Berylane suddenly stared past him, eyes as big as teacups. Her mouth dropped open, and her slim throat corded with a scream that would not come. He spun, the yellow-red sword flashing back into his hands. Across the room, one of the stand mirrors threw his reflection back at him, a tall young man with reddish hair and grey eyes, wearing only white linen smallclothes, and holding a sword carved from fire. The reflection stepped out onto the carpet, raising its sword. "I have gone mad." Thought drifted on the borders of the void. Junie, no. She saw it. She saw it. It's real. Movement to his left caught the corner of his eye. He twisted before he could think, sword sweeping up in the moon rises over water. The blade slashed through the shape, his shape climbing out of a mirror on the wall. The form wavered, broke up like dust motes floating on air, vanished. Rand's reflection appeared in the mirror again, but even as it did, it put hands on the mirror frame. He was aware of movement in mirrors all around the room. Desperately he stabbed at the mirror. Silvered glass shattered, yet it seemed that the image shattered first. He thought he heard a distant scream inside his head, his own voice screaming, fading. Even as shards of mirror fell, he lashed out with the one power. Every mirror in the room exploded silently, fountaining glass across the carpet. The dying scream in his head echoed again and again, sending shivers down his back. It was his voice. He could hardly believe it was not himself who made the sounds. He spun back to face the one that had gotten out, just in time to meet its attack, unfolding the fan to counter stones, falling down the mountain. The figure leaped back, and suddenly Rand realized it was not alone. As quickly as he had smashed the mirrors, 2 more reflections had escaped. Now they stood facing him, 3 duplicates of himself, down to the puckered round scar on his side, all staring at him, faces twisted with hatred and contempt, with a strange hunger. Only their eyes seemed empty, lifeless. Before he could take a breath, they rushed at him. Rand stepped sideways, pieces of broken mirror slicing his feet, ever sideways, from stance to stance and form to form, trying to face only one at a time. He used everything Lan, Moiraine's warder, had taught him of the sword in their daily practice. Had the 3 fought together, had they supported one another, he would have died in the first minute, but each fought him alone, as if the others did not exist. Even so, he could not stop their blades entirely. In minutes, blood ran down the side of his face, his chest, his arms. The old wound tore open, adding its flow to stain his smallclothes with red. They had his skill as well as his face, and they were 3 to his 1. Chairs and tables toppled, priceless seafolk porcelain shattered on the carpet. He felt his strength ebbing. None of his cuts was major by itself, except the old wound, but all together. Ch, ch, ch. He never thought of calling for help from the aiel outside his door. The thick walls would stifle even a death scream. Whatever was done, he must do alone. He fought wrapped in the cold emotionlessness of the void, but fear scraped at its boundaries like wind-lashed branches scratching a window in the night. His blade slipped past its opponent to slash across a face just below the eyes. He could not help wincing. It was his face, its owner sliding back just far enough to avoid a killing cut. Blood welled from the gash, veiling mouth and chin in dark crimson, but the ruined face did not change expression, and its empty eyes never flickered. It wanted him dead, the way a starving man wanted food. Can anything kill them? All 3 bled from the wounds he had managed to inflict, but bleeding did not seem to slow them, as he knew it was slowing him. They tried to avoid his sword, but did not appear to realize they had been hurt. If they have been, he thought grimly. Light, if they bleed, they can be hurt. They must. He needed a respite, a moment to catch his breath, to gather himself. Suddenly, he leaped away from them, onto the bed, rolling across its width. He sensed rather than saw blades, slashing the sheets, barely missing his flesh. Staggering, he landed on his feet, caught at a small table to steady himself. The shining, gold-worked silver bowl on the table wobbled. One of his doubles had climbed onto the torn bed, kicking goose feathers as it padded across warily, sword at the ready. The other two came slowly around, still ignoring each other, intent only on him. Their eyes glistened like glass. Rand shuddered as pain stabbed his hand on the table. An image of himself, no more than 6 inches tall, drew back its small sword. Instinctively he grabbed the figure before it could stab again. It writhed in his grip, baring teeth at him. He became aware of small movements all around the room, of small reflections by the score stepping out of polished silver. His hand began to numb, to grow cold, as if the thing was sucking the warmth out of his flesh. The heat of Sedin swelled inside him, a rushing filled his head, and the heat flowed into his icy hand. Suddenly the small figure burst like a bubble, and he felt something flow into him from the bursting, some little portion of his lost strength. He jerked as tiny jolts of vitality seemed to pelt him. When he raised his head, wondering why he was not dead, the small reflections he had half glimpsed were gone. The 3 larger stood wavering, as if his gain in strength had been their loss. Yet as he looked up, they steadied on their feet and came on, if more cautiously. He backed away, thinking furiously, sword threatening first one and then another. If he continued to fight them as he had been, they would kill him sooner or later. He knew that as surely as he knew he was bleeding. But something linked the reflections, absorbing the small one. The far-off thought made him queasy, but that was what it had been. Had not only brought the others with it, it had also affected the bigger, for a moment at least. If he could do the same to one of them, it might destroy all 3. Even thinking of absorbing them made him vaguely aware of wanting to empty his stomach. But he did not know another way. I don't know this way. How did I do it? Light. What did I do? He had to grapple with one of them. To touch it at least, he was somehow sure of that. But if he tried to get that close, he would have 3 blades through him in as many heartbeats. Reflections. How much are they still reflections? Hoping he was not being a fool if he was, he might well be a dead one. He let his sword vanish. He was ready to bring it back on the instant, but when his carved fire blade winked out of existence, the others did too. For a moment, confusion painted 3 copies of his face, one a bloody ruin. But before he could seize one of them, they leaped for him, all 4 crashing to the floor in a tangle of grappling limbs, rolling across the glass-littered carpet. Cold soaked into Rand. Numbness crept along his limbs, through his bones, until he barely felt the shards of mirror, the slivers of porcelain grinding into his flesh. Something close to panic flickered across the emptiness surrounding him. He might have made a fatal mistake. They were larger than the one he had absorbed, and they were drawing more heat from him. And not only heat. As he grew colder, the glassy grey eyes staring into his took on life. With chill certainty, he knew that if he died, that would not end the struggle. The 3 would turn on one another until only one remained, and that one would have his life, his memories, would be him. Stubbornly he fought, struggling harder the weaker he became. He pulled on Sedin, trying to fill himself with its heat. Even the stomach-turning taint was welcome, for the more of it he felt, the more Sedin suffused him. If his stomach could rebel, then he was still alive, and if he lived, he could fight. But how? How? What did I do before? Sedin raged through him, till it seemed that if he survived his attackers, he would only be consumed by the power. How did I do it? All he could do was pull at Sedin and try reach, strain, One of the 3 vanished. Rand felt it slide into him. It was as if he had fallen from a height, flat onto stony ground, and then the other 2 together. The impact flung him onto his back, where he lay staring up at the worked plaster ceiling with its gilded bosses, lay luxuriating in the fact that he was still breathing. The power still swelled in every crevice of his being. He wanted to spew up every meal he had ever eaten. He felt so alive that, by comparison, life not soaked in Sedin was living a shadow. He could smell the beeswax of the candles and the oil in the lamps. He could feel every fibre of the carpet against his back. He could feel every gash in his flesh, every cut, every nick, every bruise. But he held on to Seaim. One of the Forsaken had tried to kill him. Or all of them had. It must have been that, unless the Dark One was free already, in which case he did not think he would have faced anything as easy or as simple as this. So he held his link to the true source. Unless I did it myself, can I hate What I am enough to try to kill myself. Without even knowing it? Light. I have to learn to control it. I have to. Painfully, he pushed himself up. Leaving bloody footprints on the carpet, he limped to the stand where Callandor rested. Blood from hundreds of cuts covered him. He lifted the sword, and its glassy length glowed with the power flowing into it. The sword that is not a sword. That blade, apparently glass, would cut as well as the finest steel, yet Callandor truly was not a sword, but instead a remnant of the Age of Legends, a saint-angreal. With the aid of one of the relatively few angreal known to have survived the War of the Shadow and breaking of the world, it was possible to channel flows of the one power that would have burned the channeler to ash without it. With one of the even rarer saint-angreal, the flows could be increased as much, over those possible with an angreal, as an angreal increased them over channeling naked. And Callandor, usable only by a man, linked to the dragon reborn through 3,000 years of legend and prophecy, was one of the most powerful saint-angreal ever made. Holding Callandor in his hands, he could level a city's walls at a blow. Holding Callandor in his hands, he could face even one of the Forsaken. It was them. It must have been. Abruptly he realized he had not heard a sound from Berylane. Half fearing to see her dead, he turned. Still kneeling, she flinched. She had donned her robe again and hugged it around her like steel armor or stone walls. Face as white as snow, she licked her lips. Which one? Ah. Ch, ch. She swallowed and began again. Which one? Ch, ch. She could not finish it. I am the only one there is, he said gently. The one you were treating as if we were betrothed. He meant it to soothe her, perhaps make her smile. Surely a woman as strong as she had shown herself to be could smile, even facing a blood-drenched man. But she bent forward, pressing her face to the floor. I apologize humbly for having most grievously offended you, Lord Dragon. Her breathy voice did sound humble and frightened, completely unlike herself. I beg you to forget my offense, and forgive. I will not bother you again. I swear it, my Lord Dragon. On my mother's name and under the light I swear it. He loosed the knotted flow. The invisible wall confining her became a momentary stir that ruffled her robe. There is nothing to forgive, he said wearily. He felt very tired. Go as you wish. She straightened hesitantly, stretched out a hand, and gave a relieved gasp when it encountered nothing. Gathering the skirts of her robe, she began to pick her way across the glass-littered carpet, shards grating under her velvet slippers. Short of the door she stopped, facing him with an obvious effort. Her eyes could not quite meet his. I will send the aiel in to you if you wish. I could send for one of the Aes Sedai to tend your wounds. She would as soon be in a room with a Myrddraal now, or the Dark One himself, but she's no milksop. Thank you, he said quietly, but no. I would appreciate it if you told no one what happened here. Not yet. I will do what needs to be done. It had to be the Forsaken, as my Lord Dragon commands. She gave him a tight curtsy and hurried out, perhaps afraid he might change his mind about letting her go. As soon the Dark One himself, he murmured, as the door closed behind her. Limping to the foot of the bed, he lowered himself into the chest there and laid Callandor across his knees, bloody hands resting on the glowing blade. With that in his hands, even one of the Forsaken would fear him. In a moment he would send for Moiraine to heal his wounds. In a moment he would speak to the aiel outside and become the dragon reborn again. But for now he only wanted to sit and remember a shepherd named Rand al'Thor. Chapter 3. Reflection. Despite the hour, a good many people were hurrying through the stone's wide corridors, a steady trickle of men and women in the black and gold of stone servants or the livery of one high lord or another. Now and again a defender or two appeared, bareheaded and unarmed, some with their coats undone. The servants bowed or curtsied to Perrin and Fail if they came close, then hurried on with hardly a pause. Most of the soldiers gave a start on seeing them. Some bowed stiffly, hand to heart, but one and all quickened their steps as if eager to be away. Only one lamp in 3 or 4 was lit. In the dim stretches between their tall stands, shadows blurred the hanging tapestries and obscured the occasional chest against the wall. For any eyes but Perrin's, they did. His eyes glowed like burnished gold in those murky lengths of hall. He walked quickly from lamp to lamp and kept his gaze down unless he was in full light. Most people in the stone knew about his strangely coloured eyes, one way or another. None of them mentioned it, of course. Even Fail seemed to assume the colour was part of his association with an Aza Sedai, something that simply was, to be accepted, but never explained. Even so, a prickling always ran across his back whenever he realized that a stranger had seen his eyes shining in the dark. When they held their tongues, the silence only emphasized his apartness. "I wish they wouldn't look at me like that," he muttered as a grizzled defender twice his age came close to running once he had passed. "As though they are afraid of me. They haven't before, not this way. Why aren't all these people in bed?" A woman carrying a mop and a bucket bobbed a curtsy and scurried by with her head down. Her arm twined through his. Fairly glanced at him. "I would say the guards are not supposed to be in this part of the stone unless they are on duty. A good time to cuddle a maid on a lord's chair, and maybe pretend they are the lord and lady while lord and lady are asleep. They are probably worried that you might report them, and servants do most of their work at night. Who would want them underfoot, sweeping and dusting and polishing in daylight?" Perrin nodded doubtfully. He supposed she would know about such things from her father's house. A successful merchant likely had servants and guards for his wagons. At least these folk were not out of their beds because what had happened to him had happened to them too. If that were the case, they would be out of the stone altogether, and likely still running. But why had he been a target, singled out, as it seemed? He was not looking forward to confronting Rand, but he had to know. Fail had to stretch her stride to keep up with him. For all its splendor, all the gold and fine carving and inlays, the interior of the stone had been designed for war as much as its exterior had been. Murder holes dotted the ceiling wherever corridors crossed. Never-used arrow slits peeked into the halls at places where they might cover an entire hallway. He and Fail climbed narrow, curving staircase after narrow, curving staircase, all built into the walls or else enclosed, with more arrow slits looking down on the corridor below. None of this design had hampered the aiel, of course, the first enemy ever to get beyond the outer wall. As they trotted up one of the winding stairs, Perrin did not realize they were trotting, though he would have been moving faster if not for Fail on his arm. He caught a whiff of old sweat and a hint of sickly sweet perfume, but they registered only in the back of his brain. He was caught up in what he was going to say to Rand. "Why did you try to kill me? Are you going mad already?" There was no easy way to ask, and he did not expect easy answers. Stepping out into a shadowed corridor, nearly at the top of the stone, he found himself staring at the backs of a high lord and two of the nobleman's personal guards. Only the defenders were allowed to wear armor inside the stone, but these three had swords at their hips. That was not unusual, of course, but their presence here, on this floor, in the shadows, staring intently at the bright light at the far end of the hall, that was not usual at all. That light came from the anteroom in front of the chambers Rand had been given, or taken, or maybe been pushed into by Moiraine. Perrin and Fail had made no effort to be quiet in climbing the stairs, but the three men were so intent in their watching that none of them noticed the new arrivals at first. Then one of the blue-coated bodyguards twisted his head as if working a cramp in his neck. His mouth dropped open when he saw them. Biting off an oath, the fellow whirled to face Perrin, bearing a good hand of his sword blade. The other was only a heartbeat slower. Both stood tensed, ready, but their eyes shifted uneasily, sliding off Perrin's. They gave off a sour smell of fear. So did the High Lord, though he had his fear tightly reined. The High Lord Torian, white streaking his dark, pointed beard, moved languidly as if at a ball. Pulling a too sweetly scented handkerchief from his sleeve, he dabbed at a knobby nose that appeared not at all large when compared with his ears. A fine silk coat with red satin cuffs only exaggerated the plainness of his face. He eyed Perrin's shirt-sleeves and dabbed his nose again before inclining his head slightly. "The light illumine you," he said politely. His glance touched Perrin's yellow stare and flinched away, though his expression did not change. "You are well, I trust?" Perhaps too politely. Perrin did not really care for the man's tone, but the way Torian looked Fail up and down with a sort of casual interest clenched his fists. He managed to keep his voice level, though. "The light illumine you, High Lord Torian. I'm glad to see you helping keep watch over the Lord Dragon. Some men in your place might resent him being here." Torian's thin eyebrows twitched. prophecy has been fulfilled, and Tyr has fulfilled its place in that prophecy. Perhaps the dragon reborn will lead Tyr to a still greater destiny. What man could resent that? But it is late. A good night to you." He eyed Fail again, pursing his lips, and walked off down the hall just a bit too briskly, away from the anteroom's lights. His bodyguards heeled him like well-trained dogs. "There was no need for you to be uncivil," Fail said in a tight voice when the High Lord was out of hearing. "You sounded as if your tongue were frozen iron. If you do intend to remain here, you had better learn to get on with the lords." He was looking at you as if he wanted to dandle you on his knee. "And I do not mean like a father." She sniffed dismissively. "He is not the first man ever to look at me. If he found the nerve to try more, I could put him in his place with a frown and a glance. I do not need you to speak for me, Pervin Aibara." Still, she did not sound entirely displeased. Scratching his beard, he peered after Torern, watching the High Lord and his guards vanish around a distant corner. He wondered how the Tyren lords managed without sweating to death. "Did you notice, Fail? His heel-hounds did not take their hands off their swords until he was 10 paces clear of us." She frowned at him, then down the hall after the three, and nodded slowly. You're right, but I do not understand. They do not bow and scrape the way they do for him, but everyone walks as warily around you and Matt as they do around the Aes Sedai. Maybe being a friend of the Dragon Reborn isn't as much protection as it used to be." She did not suggest leaving again, not in words, but her eyes were full of it. He was more successful in ignoring the unspoken suggestion than he had been with the spoken. Before they reached the end of the hallway, Berylane came hurrying out of the bright lights of the anteroom, touching a thin white robe tightly around her with both arms. If the first of Myraine had been walking any faster, she would have been running. To show Fail he could be as civil as she could possibly wish, Perrin swept a bow that he wagered even Matt could not have bettered. By contrast, Fail's curtsy was the barest nod of her head, the merest bending of a knee. He hardly noticed. As Berylane rushed past them without a glance, the smell of fear, rank and raw as a festering wound, made his nostrils twitch. Beside this, Torian's fear was nothing. This was mad panic, tied with a frayed rope. He straightened slowly, staring after her. "Filling your eyes?" Fail asked softly. Intent on Berylane, wondering what had driven her so near the brink, he spoke without thinking. She smelled of. Far down the corridor, Torian suddenly stepped out of a side hallway to seize Berylane's arm. He was talking a torrent, but Perrin could not make out more than a handful of scattered words, something about her overstepping herself in her pride, and something else that seemed to be Torian offering her his protection. Her reply was short, sharp, and even more inaudible, delivered with lifted chin. Pulling herself free roughly, the first of Myraine walked away, back straight and seemingly more in command of herself. On the point of following, Torian saw Perrin watching. Dabbing at his nose with his handkerchief, the High Lord vanished back into the crossing corridor. "I do not care if she smelled of the essence of dawn," Fail said darkly. "That one is not interested in hunting a bear, however fine his hide would look stretched on a wall. She hunts the sun." He frowned at her. "The sun? The sun? A bear? What are you talking about? You go on by yourself. I think I will go to my bed, after all." "If that's what you want," he said slowly, "but I thought you were as eager to find out what happened as I am." "I think not. I'll not pretend I am eager to meet the Horn D, Crander, not after avoiding it until now. And now I am especially not eager. No doubt the two of you will have a fine talk without me, especially if there's wine." "You don't make any sense," he muttered, scrubbing a hand through his hair. "If you want to go to bed, then fine, but I wish you would say something I understand." For a long moment she studied his face, then suddenly bit her lip. He thought she was trying not to laugh. "Oh, Perrin, sometimes I believe it is your innocence I enjoy most of all." Sure enough, traces of laughter silvered her voice. "You go on to your friend, and tell me of it in the morning. As much as you want to." She pulled his head down to brush his lips with a kiss, and, as quick as the kiss, ran back down the hallway. Shaking his head, he watched until she turned into the stairs with no sign of Torren. Sometimes it was as if she spoke another language. He headed toward the lights. The anteroom was a round chamber 50 paces or more across. 100 gilded lamps hung on golden chains from its high ceiling. Polished redstone columns made an inner ring, and the floor appeared to be one huge slab of black marble, streaked with gold. It had been the anteroom of the king's chambers, in the days when Tyr had kings, before Arthur Hawkwing put everything from the spine of the world to the Arith Ocean under one king. The Tyren kings had not returned when Hawkwing's empire collapsed, and for 1,000 years the only inhabitants of these apartments had been mice tracking through dust. No High Lord had ever had enough power to dare claim them for his own. A ring of 50 defenders stood rigidly in the middle of the room, breastplates and rimmed helmets gleaming, spears all slanted at exactly the same angle. Facing every direction as they did, they were supposed to keep all intruders from the current Lord of the Stone. Their commander, a captain distinguished by 2 short white plumes on his helmet, held himself only a trifle less stiffly. He posed with one hand on his sword hilt and the other on his hip, self-important with his duty. They all smelled of fear and uncertainty, like men who lived under a crumbling cliff and had almost managed to convince themselves it would never fall. Or at least not tonight, not in the next hour. Perrin walked on by them, his boodiels making echoes. The officer started toward him, then hesitated when Perrin did not stop to be challenged. He knew who Perrin was, of course. At least, he knew as much as any Tyren knew. Travelling companion of Aes Sedai, friend of the Lord Dragon. Not a man to be interfered with by a mere officer of the Defenders of the Stone. There was his apparent task of guarding the Lord Dragon's rest, of course, but though he probably did not admit it even to himself, the officer had to know that he and his brave show of polished armour were simply that. The real guards were those Perrin met when he strode beyond the columns and approached the doors to Rand's chambers. They had been sitting so still behind the columns that they seemed to fade into the stone, though their coats and breeches in shades of grey and brown, made to hide them in the waist, stood out here as soon as they moved. 6 maidens of the spear, aiel women who had chosen a warrior's life over the hearth, flowed between him and the doors on soft, laced boots that reached their knees. They were tall for women, the tallest barely a hand shorter than he, sun-darkened, with short-cropped hair, yellow or red or something in between. 2 held curved horn bows with arrows nocked, if not drawn. The others carried small hide bucklers and 3 or 4 short spears, each short, but with spearheads long enough to stick through a man's body with inches to spare. "I do not think I can let you go in," a woman with flame-coloured hair said, smiling slightly to take the sting out of the words. Aiel did not go about grinning as much as other folk, or show a great deal of any outward emotion for that matter. "I think he does not want to see anyone tonight. I'm going in, Bane." Ignoring her spears, he took her by the upper arms. That was when it became impossible to ignore the spears, since she had managed to get a spear point hard against the side of his throat. For that matter, a somewhat blonder woman named Chiad suddenly had one of her spears at the other side, as if the two were intended to meet somewhere in the middle of his neck. The other women only watched, confident that Bane and Chiad could handle whatever had to be done. Still, he did his best. "I don't have time to argue with you. Not that you listen to people who argue with you, as I remember. I'm going in." As gently as he could, he picked Bane up and set her out of his way. Chiad's spear only needed her to breathe on it to draw blood, but after one startled widening of dark blue eyes, Bane abruptly took hers away and grinned. "Would you like to learn a game called Maiden's Kiss, Perrin? You might play well, I think. At the very least you would learn something." One of the others laughed aloud. Chiad's spear point left his neck. He took a deep breath, hoping they would not notice it was his first, since the spears touched him. They had not veiled their faces. Their shufa lay coiled around their necks like dark scarves. But he did not know if Aiel had to do so before they killed, only that veiling meant they were ready to. "Another time, perhaps," he said politely. They were all grinning as if Bane had said something amusing, and his not understanding was part of the humour. Tom was right. A man could go crazy trying to understand women of any nation and any station in life. That was what Tom said. As he reached for a door handle in the shape of a rearing golden lion, Bane added, "On your head be it. He has already chased out what most men would consider better company by far than you." Of course, he thought, pulling open the door. Berylane. She was coming from here. Tonight, everything is revolving around. The first of Myraine vanished from his thoughts as he got a look into the room. Broken mirrors hung on the walls, and broken glass covered the floor, along with shards of shattered porcelain and feathers from the slashed mattress. Open books lay tumbled among overturned chairs and benches, and Rand was sitting at the foot of his bed, slumped against one of the bedposts, with eyes closed and hands limp atop Calendar, which lay across his knees. He looked as if he had taken a bath in blood. "Get Moiraine," Perrin snapped at the aiel women. Was Rand still alive? If he was, he needed Aes Sedai healing to stay that way. "Tell her to hurry." He heard a gasp behind him, then soft boots running. Rand lifted his head. His face was a smeared mask. "Shut the door. Moiraine will be here soon, Rand. Rest easy." "She will." "Shut the door, Perrin." Murmuring among themselves, the aiel women frowned, but moved back. Perrin pulled the door to, cutting off a questioning shout from the white-plumed officer. Glass crunched under his boots as he crossed the carpet to Rand. Tearing a strip from a wildly sliced linen sheet, he wadded it against the wound in Rand's side. Rand's hands tightened on the transparent sword of the pressure, then relaxed. Blood soaked through almost immediately. Cuts and gashes covered him from the soles of his feet to his head. Slivers of glass glittered in many of them. Perrin rolled his shoulders helplessly. He did not know what more to do other than wait for Moiraine. "What under the light did you try to do, Rand? You look as though you tried to skin yourself. And you nearly killed me as well." For a moment he thought Rand was not going to answer. "Not me," Rand said finally in a near whisper. "One of the Forsaken." Perrin tried to relax muscles he did not remember tensing. The effort was only partly successful. He had mentioned the Forsaken to fail, not exactly casually, but by and large he had been trying not to think of what the Forsaken might do when they found out where Rand was. If one of them could bring down the Dragon Reborn, he or she would stand high above the others when the Dark One broke free. The Dark One free, and the last battle lost before it was fought. "Are you sure?" he said just as quietly. "It had to be, Perrin. It had to be. If one of them came after me as well as you—" Spice. "Where's Matt, Rand? If he was alive and went through what I did, he'd be thinking what I did. That it was you. He'd be here by now to bless you out, or on a horse and halfway to the city gates." Rand struggled to sit erect. Drying blood smears cracked, and fresh trickles started on his chest and shoulders. "If he is dead, Perrin, you had best get as far from me as you can. I think you and Loyal are right about that." He paused, studying Perrin. "You and Matt must wish I had never been born, or at least that you'd never seen me. There was no point in going to check if anything had happened to Matt. It was over and done now. And he had a feeling that his makeshift bandage, pressed against Rand's side, might be what would keep him alive long enough for Moiraine to get there. You don't seem to care if he has gone off. Burn me, he's important too. What are you going to do if he's gone? Or dead, the light send it not so. What they least expect." Rand's eyes looked like morning mist covering the dawn, blue-grey with a feverish glow seeping through. His voice had a knife edge. "That is what I have to do in any case, what everyone least expects." Perrin took a slow breath. Rand had a right to taut nerves. It was not a sign of incipient madness. He had to stop watching for signs of madness. Those signs would come soon enough, and watching would do nothing but keep his stomach tied in knots. "What's that?" he asked quietly. Rand closed his eyes. "Well, I only know I have to catch them by surprise." "Catch everyone by surprise," he muttered fiercely. One of the doors opened to admit a tall aielman, his dark red hair touched with grey. Behind him the Tyren officer's plumes bobbed as he argued with the maidens. He was still arguing when Bane pushed the door shut. Rewatch surveyed the room with sharp blue eyes, as if he suspected enemies hiding behind a drape or an overturned chair. The clan chief of the Tardad Aiel had no visible weapon except the heavy-bladed knife at his waist, but he carried authority and confidence like weapons, quietly, yet as surely as if they were sheathed alongside the knife. And his shufar hung about his shoulders. No one who knew the slightest about Aiel took one for less than dangerous when he wore the means to veil his face. That Tyren fool outside sent word to his commander that something had happened in here, Rewatch said, and rumors are already sprouting like corpse moss in a deep cave. Everything from the White Tower trying to kill you to the last battle fought here in this room." Perrin opened his mouth. Rewatch raised a forestalling hand. "I happened to meet Berelain, looking as if she had been told the day she would die, and she told me the truth of it. And it does look to be the truth, though I doubted her." "I sent for Moiraine," Perrin said. Rewatch nodded. Of course, the maidens would have told him everything they knew. Rand gave a painful bark of a laugh. "I told her to keep quiet. It seems the Lord Dragon doesn't rule Myriane." He sounded more wryly amused than anything else. "I have daughters older than that young woman," Rewatch said. "I do not believe she will tell anyone else. I think she would like to forget everything that happened tonight." "And I would like to know what happened," Moiraine said, gliding into the room. Slight and slender as she was, Rewatch towered over her as much as the man who followed her in, Lan, her warder, but it was the Aes Sedai who dominated the room. She must have run to come so fast, but she was calm as a frozen lake now. It took a great deal to ruffle Moiraine's serenity. Her blue silk gown had a high lace neck and sleeves slashed with darker velvet, but the heat and humidity did not appear to touch her. A small blue stone, suspended on her forehead from a fine golden chain in her dark hair, flashed in the light, emphasizing the absence of the slightest sheen of sweat. As always when they met, Lan's and Rewatch's icy blue stares nearly struck sparks. A braided leather cord held Lan's dark hair, grey-streaked at the temples. His face looked to have been carved from rock, all hard planes and angles, and his sword rode his hip like part of his body. Perrin was not sure which of the two men was more deadly, but he thought a mouse could starve on the difference. The warder's eyes swung to Rand. "I thought you were old enough to shave without someone to guide your hand." Rewatch smiled, a slight smile, but the first Perrin had ever seen from him in Lan's presence. "He is young yet. He will learn." Lan glanced back at the Aielman, then returned the smile, just as slightly. Moiraine gave the two men a brief, withering look. She did not seem to pick her way as she crossed the carpet, but she stepped so lightly, holding her skirts up, that not one shard of glass crunched under her slippers. Her eyes swept around the room, taking in the smallest details, Perrin was sure. For a moment she studied him. He did not meet her gaze. She knew too much about him for comfort, but she bore down on Rand like a silent, silken avalanche, icy and inexorable. Perrin dropped his hand and moved out of her way. The wadded cloth stayed against Rand's side, held by congealing blood. From head to foot, the blood was beginning to dry in black streaks and smears. The slivers of glass in his skin glittered in the lamplight. Moiraine touched the blood-caked cloth with her fingertips, then took her hand back as though changing her mind about looking underneath. Perrin wondered how the Aes Sedai could look at Rand without wincing, but her smooth face did not change. She smelled faintly of rose-scented soap. "At least you are alive." Her voice was musical, a chill, angry music at the moment. "What happened can wait. Try to touch the true source." "Why?" Rand asked in a wary voice. "I cannot heal myself, even if I knew how to heal. No one can. I know that much." For the space of a breath, Moiraine seemed on the point of an outburst, strange as that would have been, but in another breath she was once again layered in calm, so deep that surely nothing could crack it. Only some of the strength for healing comes from the healer. The power can replace what comes from the healed. Without it, you will spend tomorrow flat on your back, and perhaps the next day as well. Now, draw on the power if you can, but do nothing with it. Simply hold it. Use this if you must. She did not have to bend far to touch Callandor. Rand moved the sword from under her hand. Simply hold it, you say. He sounded about to laugh out loud. Very well. Nothing happened that Perrin could see, not that he expected to. Rand sat there like the survivor of a lost battle, looking at Moiraine. She hardly blinked. Twice she scrubbed her fingers against her palms, as if unaware. After a time, Rand sighed. "I cannot even reach the void. I can't seem to concentrate." A quick grin cracked the blood drying on his face. "I do not understand why." A thick red thread snaked its way down past his left eye. "Then I will do it, as I always have," Moiraine said, and took Rand's head in her hands, careless of the blood that ran over her fingers. Rand lurched to his feet with a roaring gasp, as if all the breath were being squeezed from his lungs, back arching so his head nearly tore free of her grasp. One arm flung wide, fingers spread and bending back so far it seemed they must break. The other hand clamped down on Callandor's hilt, the muscles of that arm knotting visibly into cramps. He shook like cloth caught in a windstorm. Dark flakes of dried blood fell, and bits of glass tinkled onto the chest and floor, forced out of cuts closing up and knitting themselves together. Perrin shivered as if that windstorm roared around him. He had seen healing done before, that and more, greater and worse, but he could never be complacent about seeing the power used, about knowing it was being used, not even for this. Tales of Aes Sedai, told by merchants, guards and drivers, had embedded themselves in his mind long years before he met Moiraine. Rewatch smelled sharply uneasy. Only Lan took it as a matter of course. Lan and Moiraine. Almost as soon as it began, it was done. Moiraine took her hands away, and Rand slumped, catching the bedpost to hold himself on his feet. It was difficult to say whether he clutched the bedpost, or Callandor more tenaciously. When Moiraine tried to take the sword to replace it on the ornate stand against the wall, he drew it away from her firmly, even roughly. Her mouth tightened momentarily, but she contented herself with pulling the wad of cloth from his side, using it to scrub away some of the surrounding smears. The old wound was a tender scar again. The other injuries were simply gone. The mostly dried blood that still covered him could have come from someone else. Moiraine frowned. "But it still does not respond," she murmured half to herself. "It will not heal completely. That is the one that will kill me, isn't it?" he asked her softly, then quoted, "His blood on the rocks of Sheol Ghul, washing away the shadow, sacrifice for man's salvation." "You read too much," she said sharply, "and understand too little. Do you understand more?" "If you do, then tell me." "He is only trying to find his way," Lan said suddenly. "No man likes to run forward blindly when he knows there is a cliff somewhere ahead." Perrin gave a twitch of surprise. Lan almost never disagreed with Moiraine, or at least not where anyone could overhear. He and Rand had been spending a good deal of time together, though, practicing the sword. Moraine's dark eyes flashed, but what she said was, "He needs to be in bed. Will you ask that wash water be brought, and another bedchamber prepared? This one needs a thorough cleaning, and a new mattress." Lan nodded and put his head into the anteroom for a moment, speaking quietly. "I will sleep here, Moiraine." Letting go of the bedpost, Rand pushed himself erect, grounding Callandor's point on the littered carpet, and resting both hands on the hilt. If he leaned a little on the sword, it did not show much. "I won't be chased any more. Not even out of a bed." "Taishar Manethrin," Lan murmured. This time even Rewatch looked startled, but if Moiraine heard the warder compliment Rand, she gave no sign of it. She was staring at Rand, her face smooth but thunderheads in her eyes. Rand wore a quizzical little smile, as if wondering what she would try next. Perrin edged toward the doors. If Rand and the Aes Sedai were going to match wills, he would just as soon be elsewhere. Lan did not appear to care. It was hard to tell with that stance of his, somehow standing with his back straight and slouching at the same time. He could have been bored enough to sleep where he stood or ready to draw his sword. His manner suggested either, or both. Rewatch stood much the same, but he was eyeing the doors too. "Stay where you are." Moiraine did not look away from Rand, and her outflung finger pointed halfway between Perrin and Rewatch, but Perrin's feet stopped just the same. Rewatch shrugged and folded his arms. "Stubborn," Moiraine muttered. This time the word was for Rand. "Very well. If you mean to stand there until you drop, you can use the time before you fall on your face to tell me what occurred here. I cannot teach you, but if you tell me, perhaps I can see what you did wrong. A small chance, but perhaps I can." Her voice sharpened. "You must learn to control it, and I do not mean just because of things like this. If you do not learn to control the power, it will kill you. You know that. I have told you often enough. You must teach yourself. You must find it within yourself. I did nothing except survive," he said in a dry voice. She opened her mouth, but he went on. "Do you think I could channel and not know it? I didn't do it in my sleep. This happened awake." He wavered and caught himself on the sword. "Even you could not channel anything but spirit asleep," Moiraine said coolly, "and this was never done with spirit." I was about to ask, what did happen? Perrin felt his hackles rising as Rand told his story. The axe had been bad enough, but at least the axe was something solid, something real. to have your own reflection jump out of mirrors at you. Ch, ch, ch. Unconsciously he shifted his feet, trying not to stand on any fragments of glass. Soon after he began speaking, Rand glanced behind him at the chest, a quick look, as if he did not want it observed. After a moment, the slivers of silvered glass that was scattered across the lid of the chest stirred and slid off onto the carpet as though pushed by an unseen broom. Rand exchanged looks with Moiraine, then sat down slowly and went on. Perrin was not sure which of them had cleared the chest top. There was no mention of Berylane in the tale. It must have been one of the Forsaken, Rand finished at last. Maybe Samael. You said he's in Ilion, unless one of them is here, in Tyr. Could Samael reach the stone from Ilion? Not even if he held Kalandor, Moiraine told him. There are limits. Samael is only a man, not the Dark One. Only a man. Not a very good description, Perrin thought. A man who could channel, but who somehow had not gone mad, at least not yet. Not that anyone knew. A man perhaps as strong as Rand, but where Rand was trying to learn, Samael knew every trick of his talents already. A man who had spent 3,000 years trapped in the Dark One's prison. A man who had gone over to the shadow of his own choice. Oh, only a man did not begin to describe Samael or any of the Forsaken, male or female. Then one of them is here, in the city. Rand put his head down on his wrists, but jerked himself erect immediately, glaring at those in the room. I'll not be chased again. I'll be the hound first. I will find him or her, and I will. Not one of the Forsaken, Moiraine cut in. I think not. This was too simple, and too complex. Rand spoke calmly. No riddles, Moiraine. If not the Forsaken, who? Or what? The Aes Sedai's face could have done for an anvil, yet she hesitated, feeling her way. There was no telling whether she was unsure of the answer or deciding how much to reveal. As the seals holding the Dark One's prison weaken, she said after a time, it may be inevitable that a miasma will escape even while he is still held, like bubbles rising from the things rotting on the bottom of a pond. But these bubbles will drift through the pattern until they attach to a thread and burst. Light! It slipped out before Perrin could stop it. Moraine's eyes turned to him. You mean what happened to Rand is going to start happening to everybody? Not to everyone. Not yet, at least. In the beginning, I think there will only be a few bubbles, slipping through cracks the Dark One can reach through. Later, who can say? And just as Tarvren bend the other threads in the pattern around them, I think perhaps Tarvren will tend to attract these bubbles more powerfully than others do. Her eyes said she knew Rand was not the only one to have had a waking nightmare. A brief touch of a smile, there and gone almost before he saw it, said he could keep silent if he wished to hold it secret from others. But she knew. Yet in the months to come, the years, should we be lucky enough to have that long, I fear a good many people will see things to give them white hairs if they survive. Matt, Rand said, do you know if he spice? Is he? I will know soon enough, Moiraine replied calmly. What is done cannot be undone, but we can hope. Whatever her tone, though, she smelled ill at ease until Ruach spoke. He is well. He is well. Or was. I saw him on my way here. Going where? Moiraine said, with an edge in her voice. He looked to be heading for the servants' quarters, the Aielman told her. He knew that the three were Ta'veren, if not as much else as he thought he did, and he knew Matt well enough to add, not the stables Aes Sedai. The other way, toward the river, and there are no boats at the stone's docks. He did not stumble over words like boat and dock, the way most of the aiel did, although in the waste such things existed only in stories. She nodded, as if she had expected nothing else. Perrin shook his head. She was so used to hiding her real thoughts, she seemed to veil them out of habit. Suddenly, one of the doors opened and Bane and Chiad slipped in, without their spears. Bane was carrying a large white bow and a fat pitcher, with steam rising from the top. Chiad had towels folded under her arm. Why are you bringing this? Moiraine demanded. Chiad shrugged. She would not come in. Rand barked a laugh. Even the servants know enough to stay clear of me. Put it anywhere. Your time is running out, Rand, Moiraine said. The Tyrants are becoming used to you after a fashion, and no one fears what is familiar as much as what is strange. How many weeks or days before someone tries to put an arrow in your back or poison in your food? How long before one of the Forsaken strikes or another bubble comes sliding along the pattern? Don't try to harry me, Moiraine. He was blood-filthy, half-naked, more than half leaning on Calendar to stay sitting up, but he managed to fill those words with quiet command. "I would not run for you either. Choose your way soon," she said. "And this time, inform me what you mean to do. My knowledge cannot aid you if you refuse to accept my help." "Your help?" Rand said wearily. "I'll take your help. But I will decide, not you." He looked at Perrin as if trying to tell him something without words, something he did not want the others to hear. Perrin had not a clue what it was. After a moment, Rand sighed. His head sank a little. "I want to sleep. All of you, go away. Please, we will talk tomorrow." His eyes flickered to Perrin again, underscoring the words for him. Moiraine crossed the room to Bane and Chiad, and the two aiel women leaned close so she could speak for their ears alone. Perrin heard only a buzz, and wondered if she was using the power to stop him eavesdropping. She knew the keenness of his hearing. He was sure of it when Bane whispered back, and he still could not make out anything. The Aes Sedai had done nothing about his sense of smell, though. The aiel women looked at Rand as they listened, and they smelled wary. Not afraid, but as if Rand were a large animal that would be dangerous if they misstepped. The Aes Sedai turned back to Rand. "We will talk tomorrow. You cannot sit like a partridge waiting for a hunter's net." She was moving for the door before Rand could reply. Lan looked at Rand as if about to say something, but followed her without speaking. "Rand," Perrin said, "we do what we have to." Rand did not look up from the clear hilts between his hands. "We all do what we have to." He smelled afraid. Perrin nodded and followed Rewatch out of the room. Moiraine and Lan were nowhere in sight. The Tyran officer was staring at the doors from 10 paces off, trying to pretend the distance was his choice, and had nothing to do with the 4 aiel women watching him. The other 2 maidens were still in the bedchamber, Perrin realized. He heard voices from the room. "Go away," Rand said tiredly. "Just put that down and go away." "If you can stand up," Chiad said cheerfully, "we will. Only stand." There was the sound of water splashing into a bowl. "We have tended to wounded before," Bane said in soothing tones. "And I used to wash my brothers when they were little." Rewatch pushed the door shut, cutting off the rest. "You do not treat him the way the Tyrans do," Perrin said quietly. "No bowing and scraping. I don't think I've heard one of you call him Lord Dragon." "The Dragon Reborn is a wetland of prophecy," Rewatch said. "Ours is he who comes with the dawn. I thought they were the same. Else why did you come to the stone?" "Burn me, Rewatch. You aiel are the people of the dragon, just as the prophecies say. You've as good as admitted it, even if you won't say it out loud." Rewatch ignored the last part. "In your prophecies of the dragon, the fall of the stone and the taking of Calendar proclaim that the dragon has been reborn. Our prophecy says only that the stone must fall before he who comes with the dawn appears to take us back to what was ours. They may be one man, but I doubt even the wise ones could say for sure. If Rand is the one, there are things he must do yet to prove it." "What?" Perrin demanded. "If he is the one, he will know and do them. If he does not, then our search still goes on." Something unreadable in the aielman's voice pricked Perrin's ears. "And if he isn't the one you search for? What then, Rewatch? Sleep well and safely, Perrin." Rewatch's soft boots made no sound on the black marble as he walked away. The Tyran officer was still staring past the maidens, smelling of fear, failing to mask the anger and hatred on his face. If the aiel decided Rand was not he who comes with the dawn, Perrin studied the Tyran officer's face and thought of the maidens not being there, of the stone empty of aiel, and he shivered. He had to make sure Fail decided to leave. That was all there was for it. She had to decide to go, and without him. Chapter 4. Strings. Tom Merrilin sprinkled sand across what he had written to blot the ink, then carefully poured the sand back into its jar and flipped the lid shut. Riffling through the papers scattered in rough piles across the table, 6 tallow candles made fire a real danger, but he needed the light. He selected a crumpled sheet, marred by an ink blot. Carefully he compared it with what he had written, then stroked a long, white moustache with a thumb in satisfaction, and permitted himself a leathery-faced smile. The High Lord Carleon himself would have thought it was his own hand. Be wary. Your husband suspects. Only those words, and no signature. Now, if he could arrange for the High Lord Tadoshan to find it where his wife, the Lady Altima, might carelessly have left it. Ch, ch, ch. A knock sounded at the door, and he jumped. No one came to see him at this time of the night. "A moment," he called, hastily stuffing pens and inkpots and selected papers into a battered writing chest. "A moment while I put on a shirt." Locking the chest, he shoved it under the table where it might escape casual notice, and ran an eye over his small, windowless room to see if he had left anything out that should not be seen. Hoops and balls for juggling littered his narrow, unmade bed, and lay among his shaving things on a single shelf with fire wands and small items for sleight of hand. His gleeman's cloak, covered with loose patches in 100 colours, hung from a peg on the wall, along with his spare clothes and the hard leather cases holding his harp and flute. A woman's diaphanous red silk scarf was tied around the strap of the harp case, but it could have belonged to anyone. He was not sure he remembered who had tied it there. He tried to pay no more attention to one woman than any other, and all of it light-hearted and laughing. Make them laugh, even make them sigh, but avoid entanglements. That was his motto. He had no time for those. That was what he told himself. "I'm coming." He limped to the door irritably. Once he had drawn oohs and ahs from people who could hardly believe, even while they watched, that a raw-boned, white-haired old man could do backsprings and handstands and flips, limber and quick as a boy. The limp had put an end to that, and he hated it. The leg ached worse when he was tired. He jerked open the door and blinked in surprise. Well, come in, Matt. I thought you would be hard at work lightening lordlings' purses." "They didn't want to gamble any more tonight," Matt said sourly, dropping onto the three-legged stool that served as a second chair. His coat was undone and his hair dishevelled. His brown eyes darted around, never resting on one spot long, but their usual twinkle, suggesting that the lad saw something funny where no one else did, was missing tonight. Tom frowned at him, considering. Matt never stepped across this threshold without a quip about the shabby room. He accepted Tom's explanation that his sleeping beside the servants' quarters would help people forget that he had arrived in the shadow of Aes Sedai, but Matt seldom let a chance for a joke pass. If he realized that the room also assured that no one could think of Tom having any connection to the Dragon Reborn, Matt, being Matt, probably thought that a reasonable wish. It had taken Tom all of 2 sentences, delivered in haste during a rare moment when no one was looking, to make Rand see the real point. Everyone listened to a gleeman, everyone watched him, but no one really saw him or remembered who he talked to, as long as he was only a gleeman, with his hedgerow entertainments fit for country folk and servants, and perhaps to amuse the ladies. That was how Tyrens saw it. It was not as if he were a bard after all. What was bothering the boy to bring him down here at this hour? Probably one or another of the young women, and some old enough to know better, who had let themselves be caught by Matt's mischievous grin. Still, he would pretend it was one of Matt's usual visits until the lad said otherwise. "I'll get the stones board. It is late, but we have time for one game." He could not resist adding, "Would you care for a wager on it?" He would not have tossed dice with Matt for a copper, but stones was another matter. He thought there was too much order and pattern in stones for Matt's strange luck. What? Oh, it's too late for games. Tom did. Dice. Did anything. Happened down here? Leaning the stones board against a table leg, Tom dug his tabac pouch and long-stemmed pipe out of the litter remaining on the table. "Such as what?" he asked, thumbing the bowl full. He had time to stick a twist of paper in the flame of one of the candles, puff the pipe alight, and blow out the spill before Matt answered. "Such as Rand going insane, that's what." No, you'd not have had to ask if it had. A prickling made Tom shift his shoulders, but he blew a blue-grey streamer of smoke as calmly as he could and took his chair, stretching his gimpy leg out in front of him. "What happened?" Matt drew a deep breath, then let everything out in a rush. "The playing cards tried to kill me. The amyrlin and the High Lord and I didn't dream it, Tom. That's why those puffed-up jackdaws don't want to gamble anymore. They're afraid it will happen again. Tom, I'm thinking of leaving Tyr." The prickling felt as if he had black wasp nettles stuffed down his back. Why had he not left Tyr himself long since? Much the wisest thing. Hundreds of villages lay out there, waiting for a gleeman to entertain and amaze them, and each with an inn or two full of wine to drown memories. But if he did, Rand would have no one except Moiraine to keep the High Lords from manoeuvring him into corners and maybe cutting his throat. She could do it, of course, using different methods than his. He thought she could. She was caerhinin, which meant she had probably taken in the game of houses with her mother's milk, and she would tie another string to Rand for the White Tower while she was about it. Mesh him in an Aes Sedai net so strong he would never escape. But if the boy was going mad already— Fool, Tom called himself. A pure fool to stay mixed in this because of something 15 years in the past. Staying would not change that. What was done was done. He had to see Rand face to face, no matter what he had told him about keeping clear. Perhaps no one would think it too odd if a gleeman asked to perform a song for the Lord Dragon, a song especially composed. He knew a deservedly obscure Kandori tune, praising some unnamed lord for his greatness and courage in grandiose terms that never quite managed to name deeds or places. It had probably been bought by some lord who had no deeds worth naming. Well, it would serve him now. Unless Moiraine decided it was strange, that would be as bad as the High Lords taking notice. I am a fool. I should be out of here tonight. He was roiling inside, his stomach churning acid, but he had spent long years learning to keep his face straight before ever he put on a gleeman's cloak. He puffed 3 smoke rings, one inside the other, and said, "You have been thinking of leaving Tyr since the day you walked into the stone." Perched on the edge of the stool, Matt shot him an angry look. "And I mean to. I do. Why not come with me, Tom? There are towns where they think the dragon reborn hasn't drawn a breath yet, where nobody's given a thought to the bloody prophecies of the bloody dragon in years, if ever. Places where they think the Dark One is a grandmother's tale, and Trollocs are travellers' wild stories, and Myrddraal ride shadows to scare children. You could play your harp and tell your stories, and I could find a game of dice. We could live like lords, travelling as we want, staying where we want, with no one trying to kill us. That hit too close for comfort. Well, he was a fool, and there it was. He just had to make the best of it. If you really mean to go, why haven't you? Moiraine watches me," Matt said bitterly. "And when she isn't, she has somebody else doing it. I know. Aes Sedai don't like to let someone go once they lay hands on them. It was more than that, he was sure, more than what was openly known, certainly. But Matt denied any such thing, and no one else who knew was talking either, if anyone besides Moiraine did know. It hardly mattered. He liked Matt. He even owed him, in a fashion, but Matt and his troubles were a street-corner rarity compared to Rand. But I cannot believe she really has someone watching you all the time. As good as. She's always asking people where I am, what I'm doing. It gets back to me. Do you know anybody who won't tell an Aes Sedai what she wants to know? I don't. As good as being watched. You could avoid eyes if you put your mind to it. I've never seen anyone as good at sneaking about as you." "I mean that as a compliment. Something always comes up," Matt muttered. "There's so much gold to be had here. And there's a big-eyed girl in the kitchens who likes a little kiss and tickle, and one of the maids has hair like silk to her waist, and the roundest." He trailed off, as if he had suddenly realized how foolish he sounded. "Have you considered that maybe it's because, if you mention Tavern, Tom, I'm leaving?" Tom changed what he had been going to say. "That maybe it's because Rand is your friend, and you don't want to desert him." "Desert him?" The boy jumped up, kicking over the stool. "Tom, he is the bloody dragon reborn. At least that's what he and Moiraine say. Maybe he is. He can channel, and he has that bloody sword that looks like glass." "Oh, prophecies. I don't know, but I know I would have to be as crazy as these tyrants to stay." He paused. "You don't think— You don't think Moiraine is keeping me here, do you?" "With the power? I do not believe she can," Tom said slowly. He knew a good bit about Aes Sedai, enough to have some idea how much he did not know, and he thought he was right on this. Matt raked his fingers through his hair. "Tom, I think about leaving all the time, but I get these strange feelings, almost as if something was going to happen. Something momentous, that's the word. It's like knowing there'll be fireworks for Sunday, only I don't know what it is I'm expecting. Whenever I think too much about leaving, it happens. And suddenly I found some reason to stay another day. Always just one more bloody day. Doesn't that sound like Aes Sedai work to you? Tom swallowed the word tavern and took his pipe from between his teeth to peer into the smouldering tabach. He did not know much about tavern, but then no one did except the Aes Sedai, or maybe some of the Ogier. I was never much good at helping people with their problems, and worse with my own, he thought. With an Aes Sedai close to hand, I'd advise most people to ask her for help. Advice I'd not take myself. Ask Moiraine. I suppose that is out of the question in this case, but nynaeve was your wisdom back in Emond's Field. Village wisdoms are used to answering people's questions, helping with their problems. Matt gave a raucous snort of laughter, and put up with one of her lectures about drinking and gambling and spice. Tom, she acts like I'm 10 years old. Sometimes I think she believes I'll marry a nice girl and settle down on my father's farm. Some men would not find it an objectionable life, Tom said quietly. Well, I would. I want more than cows and sheep and tabach for the rest of my life. I want, Matt shook his head, all these holes in memory. Sometimes I think if I could just fill them in, I'd know. Burn me. I don't know what I'd know, but I know I want to know it. That's a twisty riddle, isn't it? I'm not certain even an Aes Sedai can help with that. A gleeman surely can't. I said, no, Aes Sedai. Tom sighed. Calm yourself, boy. I was not suggesting it. I am leaving, as soon as I can fetch my things and find a horse. Not a minute longer. In the middle of the night, the morning will do. He refrained from adding, if you really do leave. Sit down. Relax. We'll play a game of stones. I have a jar of wine here somewhere. Matt hesitated, glancing at the door. Finally, he jerked his coat straight. The morning will do. He sounded uncertain, but he picked up the overturned stool and set it beside the table. But no wine for me, he added as he sat down. Strange enough, things happen when my head is clear. I want to know the difference. Tom was thoughtful as he put the board and the bags of stones on the table. Just that easily the lad was diverted. Pulled along by an even stronger tavern named Rand or Thor was how Tom saw it. It occurred to him to wonder if he was caught in the same way. His life had certainly not been headed toward the Stone of Tyr and this room when he first met Rand, but since then it had been twitched about like a kite string. If he decided to leave, say if Rand really had gone mad, would he find reasons to keep putting it off? What is this, Tom? Matt's boot had encountered the writing case under the table. Is it all right if I move it out of my way? Of course. Go right ahead. He winced inside as Matt shoved the case aside roughly with his foot. He hoped he'd corked all the ink bottles tightly. Choose, he said, holding out his fists. Matt tapped the left, and Tom opened it to reveal a smooth, black stone, flat and round. The boy chortled at having the first go, and placed the stone on the cross-hatched board. No one seeing the eagerness in his eyes would have suspected that only moments before he had been twice as eager to go. A greatness he refused to recognize clinging to his back, and an Aes Sedai intent on keeping him for one of her pets. The lad was well and truly caught. If he was caught too, Tom decided, it would be worth it to help one man, at least, keep free of Aes Sedai. Worth it to make a payment on that 15-year-old debt. Suddenly and strangely content, he set a white stone. Did I ever tell you, he said around his pipe stem, about the wager I once made with a Damani woman? She had eyes that could drink a man's soul, and an odd-looking red bird she had bought off a seafolk ship. She claimed it could tell the future. This bird had a fat yellow beak, nearly as long as its body, and it... Chapter 5. Questioners. They should be back by now. Egwene fluttered the painted silk fan vigorously, glad the nights were at least a little cooler than the days. Tyrene women carried the fans all the time, the nobles at least, and the wealthy. But as far as she could see, they did no good at all, except when the sun was down, and not much then. Even the lamps, great golden mirrored things on silvered wall brackets, seemed to add to the heat. What can be keeping them? An hour, Moiraine had promised them, for the first time in days, and then she had left without explanation after a bare 5 minutes. Did she give any hint of why they wanted her, Aviendha? Or who wanted her, for that matter? Seated cross-legged on the floor beside the door, large green eyes startling in her dark-tanned face, the aiel woman shrugged. In coat and breeches and soft boots, shufar looped about her neck, she appeared unarmed. Karine whispered her message to Moiraine Sedai. It would not have been proper to listen. I am sorry, Aes Sedai. Guiltily, Egwene fingered the great serpent ring on her right hand, the golden serpent biting its own tail. As an accepted, she should have been wearing it on the third finger of her left hand, but letting the High Lords believe that they had 4 full Aes Sedai inside the stone kept them on their best manners, or what passed for manners among Tyrene nobles. Moiraine did not lie, of course. She never said they were more than accepted. But she never said they were accepted either, and let everyone think what they wanted to think, believe what they thought they saw. Moiraine could not lie, but she could make truth dance a fine jig. It was not the first time Egwene and the others had pretended to full sisterhood since leaving the tower, but more and more she felt uncomfortable deceiving Aviendha. She liked the aiel woman, thought they could be friends if they could ever come to know one another, but that hardly seemed possible as long as Aviendha thought Egwene was Aes Sedai. The aiel woman was there only at Moiraine's order, issued for unspoken purposes of her own. Egwene suspected it was to give them an aiel bodyguard, as if they had not learned to protect themselves. Still, even if she and Aviendha did become friends, she could not tell her the truth. The best way to keep a secret was to make sure no one knew who did not absolutely have to know. Another point Moiraine had made. Sometimes Egwene found herself wishing the Aes Sedai could be wrong, glaring wrong, just once, in a way that would not mean disaster, of course. That was the rub. Tanchico, Nynaeve muttered. Her dark, wrist-thick braid hung down her back to her waist as she stared out of one of the narrow windows. Casements swung out in the hope of catching a night breeze. On the broad river Erenin below bobbed the lanterns of a few fishing boats that had not ventured downriver, but Egwene doubted she saw them. There is nothing for it but to go to Tanchico, it seems. Nynaeve gave an unconscious hitch to her green dress with its wide neck that bared her shoulders. She did that a good deal. She would have denied wearing the dress for Lan, Moiraine's warder. She would have if Egwene had dared make the suggestion. But green, blue and white seemed to be Lan's favourite colours on women, and every dress that was not green, blue or white had vanished from Nynaeve's wardrobe. Nothing for it. She did not sound happy. Egwene caught herself giving an upward tug to her own dress. They felt odd, these dresses that just clung to the shoulders. On the other hand, she did not believe she could bear to be more covered. Light as it was, the pale red linen felt like wool. She wished she could bring herself to wear the filmy gowns Berylane wore. Not that they were suitable for public eyes, but they certainly did appear to be cool. Stop fretting over comfort, she told herself sternly. Keep your mind on the business at hand. Perhaps, she said aloud. Myself, I am not convinced. A long, narrow table, polished till it glistened, ran down the middle of the room. A tall chair stood at the end near egwene, lightly carved and touched here and there with gilt, quite plain for Tyr, while the side chairs had progressively lower backs, until those at the far end seemed little more than benches. Egwene had no idea what purpose the Tyrens had put the room to. She and the others used it for questioning 2 prisoners taken when the stone fell. She could not force herself to go into the dungeons, though Rand had ordered all of the implements that had decorated the guardroom walls melted or burned. Neither Nynaeve nor Elaine had been eager to return either. Besides, this brightly lit room, with its clean-swept green tile floor and its wall panels carved with the 3 crescents of Tyr, was a sharp contrast to the grim, grey stone of the cells, all dim and dank and dirty. That had to have some softening effect on the 2 women in prisoners' rough-woven woolens. Only that drab-brown dress, however, would have told most people that Joya Baya, standing beyond the table with her back turned, was a prisoner at all. She had been Grey Ajah, and had lost none of the Grey's cool self-possession on shifting her allegiance to the Black. Every line of her proclaimed that she stared rigidly at the far wall of her own choice, and for no other reason. Only a woman who could channel would have seen the thumb-thick flows of air that held Joya's arms to her sides and lashed her ankles together. A cage woven of air kept her eyes straight ahead. Even her ears were stopped up, so she could not hear what anyone said until they wanted her to. Once again, Egwene checked the shield woven from spirit that blocked Joya from touching the true source. It held as she knew it must. She herself had woven all the flows around Joya and tied them to maintain themselves. But she could not be easy in the same room with a dark friend who had the ability to channel even if it was blocked. Worse than just a dark friend, Black Ajah. Murder was the least of Joya's crimes. She should have been bowed down under her weight of broken oaths, blasted lives, and blighted souls. Joya's fellow prisoner, her sister in the Black Ajah, lacked her strength. Standing stoop-shouldered at the far end of the table, head down, Amiko Nagoyin seemed to sink in on herself under Egwene's gaze. There was no need to shield her. Amiko had been stilled during her capture. Still able to sense the true source, she would never again touch it, never again channel. The desire to, the need to, would remain, as sharp as the need to breathe, and her loss would be there for as long as she lived, Cedar forever out of reach. Egwene wished she could find in herself even a shred of pity, but she did not wish for it very hard. Amiko murmured something of the tabletop. "What?" Nynaeve demanded. "Speak up." Amiko raised her face humbly on its slender neck. She was still a beautiful woman, with large, dark eyes, but there was something different about her that Egwene could not quite put her finger on. Not the fear that made her clutch her coarse prisoner's dress with both hands. Something else. Swallowing, Amiko said, "You should go to Tanchico." "You've told us that 20 times, Nynaeve said roughly. 50 times. Tell us something new. Name names we do not already know. Who still in the White Tower is Black Ajah? I do not know." "You must believe me." Amiko sounded tired, utterly beaten. Not at all the way she had sounded when they were the prisoners and she the gaoler. "Before we left the tower, I knew only Liandrin, Kesmol, and Rihanna. No one knew more than 2 or 3 others, I think. Except Liandrin. I have told you everything I know." "Then you are remarkably ignorant for a woman who expected to rule part of the world when the Dark One breaks free," Egwene said dryly, snapping her fan shut for emphasis. It still stunned her, how easily she could say that now. Her stomach still clenched, an icy finger still crawled her spine, but she no longer wanted to scream or run weeping. It was possible to become used to anything. "I overheard Liandrin that once, talking to Tamili," Amiko said wearily, starting a tale she had told them many times. In the first days of her captivity she had tried to improve her story, but the more she elaborated, the more she had tangled herself in her own lies. Now she almost always told it the same way, word for word. If you could have seen Liandrin's face when she saw me. She would have murdered me on the spot had she thought I'd heard anything. And Temail likes to hurt people. She enjoys it. I only heard a little before they saw me. Liandrin said there was something in Tanchico, something dangerous to him. She meant Rand. She could not say his name, and a mention of the dragon reborn was enough to send her into tears. Liandrin said it was dangerous to whoever used it too, almost as dangerous as to him. That is why she had not already gone after it. And she said being able to channel would not protect him. She said, "When we find it, his filthy ability will bind him for us." Sweat ran down her face, but she shivered almost uncontrollably. Not a word had changed. Egwene opened her mouth, but Nynaeve spoke first. "I've heard enough of this. Let us see if the other has anything new to say." Egwene glared at her, and Nynaeve stared back just as hard, neither blinking. "Sometimes she thinks she's still the wisdom," Egwene thought grimly, "and I'm still the village girl to teach about herbs." She had better realize things are different now. Nynaeve was strong in the power, stronger than Egwene, but only when she could actually manage to channel. Unless angry, Nynaeve could not channel at all. Elaine usually smoothed things over when it came to this, as it did more often than it should. By the time Egwene thought of smoothing matters herself, she had almost always dug in her heels and flared back, and trying to be soothing then would only be backing down. That was how Nynaeve would see it, she was sure. She could not remember Nynaeve ever making any move to back down, so why should she? This time Elaine was not there. Moiraine had summoned the daughter heir with a word and a gesture to follow the maiden who had come for the Aes Sedai. Without her, the tension stretched, each of the accepted waiting for the other to blink first. Aviendha barely breathed. She kept herself strictly out of their confrontations. No doubt she considered it simple wisdom to stand clear. Strangely, it was Amiko who broke the impasse this time, though likely all she meant to do was demonstrate her cooperation. She turned to face the far wall, waiting patiently to be bound. The foolishness of it struck Egwene suddenly. She was the only woman in the room who could channel. Unless Nynaeve grew angry, or Joya's shield failed, she tested the weave of spirit again without thinking, and she indulged in a staring match while Amiko waited to accept her bonds. At another time she might have laughed at herself aloud. Instead, she opened herself to Cedar, that never-seen, ever-felt glowing warmth that seemed always to be just beyond the corner of her eye. The one power filled her, like joyous life itself redoubled, and she wove the flows around Amiko. Nynaeve merely grunted. It was doubtful she was mad enough to sense what Egwene was doing. She could not, without her temper up, yet she could see Amiko stiffen as the flows of air touched her, then slump, half supported by the flows, as if to show how little she was resisting. Aviendha shuddered, the way she had taken to doing whenever she knew the power was being channeled near her. Egwene wove blocks for Amiko's ears. Questioning them one at a time did little good if they could hear each other's stories, and turned to Joya. She shifted her fan from hand to hand so she could wipe them on her dress, and stopped with a grimace of distaste. Her sweaty palms had nothing to do with the temperature. Her face, Aviendha said abruptly, and surprisingly, she almost never spoke, unless addressed by Moiraine or one of the others. Amiko's face. She does not have the look she did, as if the years had passed her by, not as much as she did. Is that because she was? Because she was stilled, she finished in a breathless rush. She had picked up a few habits being so much around them. No woman of the tower could speak of stilling without a chill. Egwene moved down the table to where she could see Amiko's face from the side and yet stay out of Joya's vision. Joya's eyes always turned her stomach to a lump of ice. Aviendha was right. That was the difference she herself had noticed and not understood. Amiko looked young, perhaps younger than her years, but it was not quite the agelessness of Aes Sedai, who had worked years with the One Power. You have sharp eyes, Aviendha, but I don't know if this has anything to do with stilling. It must, though, I suppose. I don't know what else could cause it. She realized that did not sound very much like an Aes Sedai, who generally spoke as if they knew everything. When an Aes Sedai said she did not know, she usually managed to make her denial appear to cloak volumes of knowledge. While she was racking her brain for something properly portentous, Nynaeve came to her rescue. Relatively few Aes Sedai have ever been burned out, Aviendha, and far fewer stilled. Burned out was what it was called when it happened by accident. Officially, stilling resulted from trial and sentence. Egwene could not see the point of it, really. It was like having two words for falling down the stairs, depending on whether you tripped or were pushed. For that, most Aes Sedai seemed to see it the same, except when teaching novices or accepted. 3 words, actually. Men were gentled, must be gentled, before they went mad. Only now there was Rand, and the tower did not dare gentle him. Nynaeve had put on a lecturing tone, no doubt trying to sound Aes Sedai. She was doing an imitation of Sheriam before a class, Egwene realized, hands clasped at her waist, smiling slightly, as if it were all so simple when you applied yourself. Stilling is not a thing anyone would choose to study, you understand, Nynaeve continued. It is generally accepted to be irreversible. What makes a woman able to channel cannot be replaced once it is removed, any more than a hand that has been cut off can be healed back into existence. At least, no one had ever been able to heal stilling. There had been attempts. What Nynaeve said was generally true, yet some sisters of the Brown Ajah would study almost anything if given the chance, and some Yellow sisters, the best healers, would try to learn to heal anything. But even a hint of success at healing a woman who had been stilled was non-existent. Aside from that one hard fact, little is known. Women who are stilled seldom live more than a few years. They seem to stop wanting to live. They give up. As I said, it is an unpleasant subject. Aviendha shifted uncomfortably. I only thought that might be it, she said in a low voice. Egwene thought it might be too. She resolved to ask Moiraine if she ever saw her without Abienda there as well. It seemed to her that their deceit got in the way almost as much as it helped. Let us see if Joya still tells the same tale too. Even so, she had to take herself in hand before she could unravel the flows of air woven around the dark friend. Joya must have been stiff from standing so still for so long, but she turned smoothly to face them. The sweat beading her forehead could not diminish her dignity and presence any more than her drab, rough dress lessened the sense of her being there by choice. She was a handsome woman with something motherly about her face, despite its ageless smoothness, something comforting. But the dark eyes set in that face made a hawk's look kind. She smiled at them, a smile that never reached those eyes. The light illumine you. May the hand of the Creator shelter you. I will not hear that out of you. Nynaeve's voice was quiet and calm, but she tossed her braid over her shoulder and gripped the end in her fist, the way she did when angry or uneasy. Egwene did not think she was uneasy. Joya did not seem to make Nynaeve's skin crawl as she did Egwene's. I have repented my sins, Joya said smoothly. The dragon is reborn, and he holds Kalandor. The prophecies are fulfilled. The Dark One must fail. I can see that now. My repentance is real. No one can walk so long in the shadow that she cannot come again to the light. Nynaeve's face had grown darker by the word. Egwene was sure she was furious enough to channel now, but if she did, it would probably be to strangle Joya. Egwene did not believe Joya's repentance any more than Nynaeve, of course, but the woman's information might be real. Joya was quite capable of a cold decision to go over to what she believed would be the winning side. Or she might only be buying time, lying in hope of rescue. Lies should not have been possible for an Aes Sedai, even one who had lost all right to the name, not outright lies. The very first of the 3 oaths, taken with the oath rod in hand, should have seen to that. But whatever oaths to the Dark One were sworn on joining the Black Ajah, they seemed to sever all 3 oaths. Well, the amyrlin had sent them out to hunt the Black Ajah, to hunt Liandrin and the other 12 who had done murder and fled the tower, and all they had to go on now was what these 2 could, or would, tell them. Give us your tale again, Egwene commanded. Use different words this time. I am tired of listening to memorized stories. If she was lying, there was more chance she would trip herself up telling it differently. We will hear you out. That was for Nynaeve's benefit. She gave a loud sniff, then a curt nod. Joya shrugged. As you wish. As you wish. Let me see. Different words. The false dragon, Mazrim Taim, who is captured in Saldea, can channel with incredible strength. Perhaps as much as Randall Thor, or nearly so, if the reports can be believed. Before he can be brought to Tar Valor and gentled, Liandrin means to break him free. He will be proclaimed as the Dragon Reborn, his name given as Randall Thor, and then he will be set to destruction on such a scale as the world has not seen since the War of the 100 Years. That is impossible, Nynaeve broke in. The pattern will not accept a false dragon, not now that Rand has proclaimed himself. Egwene sighed. They had had this out before, but Nynaeve always argued the point. She was not sure Nynaeve really believed that Rand was the dragon reborn, no matter what she said, no matter the prophecies and Kalandor and the fall of the stone. Nynaeve was just enough older than he to have looked after him when he was a child, just as she had after Egwene. He was an Emon's fielder, and Nynaeve still saw her first duty as protecting the people of Emon's field. Is that what Moiraine told you? Joya asked with a touch of contempt. Moiraine has spent little time in the tower since she was raised, and not much more with her sisters anywhere. I suppose she knows the workings of village life, perhaps even something of the politics between nations, but she does claim certainty about matters learned only through study and discussion with those who know. Still, she might be correct. Mazrim Taim might well find it impossible to proclaim himself. But if others do it for him, is there a difference that matters? Egwene wished Moiraine would come back. The woman would not speak so confidently if Moiraine were there. Joya knew very well that she and Nynaeve were only accepted. It made a difference. Made a difference. Go on, Egwene said.